The great chamber of the galactic conclave stretched upward for what seemed like forever. Its walls were made of living crystal that pulsed with soft light, and its floors were polished stone that had been walked upon by thousands of species over millions of years. This was the heart of civilized space, the place where the 12 greatest species in the known galaxy gathered to make their decisions and pass their judgments. Today, they were here to judge humanity. Ambassador stood at the center of the chamber with her small delegation of 5 other humans. They looked tiny and fragile compared to the massive beings that surrounded them on all sides. They towered above them, their bodies made of living crystal that caught the light and threw rainbows across the walls. They floated in their anti-gravity fields, their gas giant forms swirling with colors that human eyes could barely process. They sat in their pools of liquid methane, their tentacles waving slowly as they watched the proceedings with ancient, patient eyes. 12 species, 12 seats of power, and humanity standing in the middle like prisoners awaiting their sentence. Ambassador of the rose from her seat. She was beautiful in a cold, hard way, her crystalline body shaped into something that almost looked humanoid but was clearly not. Her voice rang out through the chamber like the sound of wind chimes in a storm. "We have deliberated for 3 standard rotations," she announced. "We have studied your history, we have examined your biology, we have analyzed your culture and your psychology, and we have reached our decision." Kept her face perfectly still. She had been warned that this moment was coming. Earth's scientists and diplomats had prepared her for the worst, but nothing could truly prepare someone for being judged by beings who saw themselves as gods. "The human species," continued, "is hereby classified as Category 7, primitive, violent, unfit for membership in the Galactic Accord." A murmur ran through the chamber. Some of the other ambassadors nodded in agreement. Others simply watched with cold, distant eyes. "You are beast," said, and the word hung in the air like a physical thing. "This is not an insult. This is a classification, a statement of fact. Your species has not transcended its animal nature. You still wage war against each other. You still consume the flesh of other creatures. You still carry the biology of predators despite having achieved sapience. These are the marks of a beast, and they cannot be ignored." Felt the anger rising in her chest, but she pushed it down. She had been trained for this. She had been told to stay calm no matter what was said. The future of humanity depended on her ability to control herself in this moment. "What does this classification mean for us?" she asked, her voice steady and clear. Tilted her head in a gesture that might have been curiosity or contempt. "You will be permitted to trade at designated stations along the border of Accord space. You will not be permitted to travel freely through civilized territories. You will not be given access to advanced technology. You will not have a voice in galactic governance. You will remain where you are, at the edge of the galaxy, until such time as you have evolved past your primitive nature." "And how long might that take?" asked. "The required 40,000 years to transcend their predatory instincts," replied. "The required 60,000. Given your species' current trajectory, we estimate that you may achieve basic civilization in approximately 100,000 years, perhaps longer." 100,000 years. The words hit like a physical blow. That was longer than humanity had existed as a species. That was longer than all of recorded human history put together. And these beings were telling her that it would take that long before humanity was considered worthy of joining their precious conclave. "We have a right to be heard," said. "We have achieved faster-than-light travel. We have built colonies on a dozen worlds. We have—" "You have achieved nothing," interrupted, her voice sharp and cold. "Your faster-than-light technology was reverse-engineered from a crashed vessel you found on your moon. Your colonies are primitive settlements that lack even basic environmental controls. Your species cannot even stop fighting among itself long enough to present a united government. You are children playing with tools you do not understand, and you are dangerous because of it." The other ambassadors nodded in agreement. Some of them made sounds that might have been laughter, though could not be sure. "We do not hate you," said, and her voice softened slightly. "We simply understand what you are. You are a young species, still bound by your animal instincts. In time, you may grow past this. But that time is not now, and we cannot allow beasts to sit at the table of civilized beings. The decision is final." Stood in silence for a long moment. She looked around the chamber at the 12 species that had judged humanity and found it wanting. She saw the crystal beauty of the swirling majesty of the ancient patience of the. They were all so sure of themselves, so confident in their own superiority. And perhaps they were right. Perhaps humanity was everything they said it was. Perhaps they were violent and primitive and dangerous. Perhaps they were beasts. But beasts had their own kind of strength. "We accept your judgment," said finally. "We will abide by your restrictions. We will trade at your designated stations and remain at the edge of your precious civilized space. But we will not forget what was said here today, and we will not stop being what we are." Nodded, apparently satisfied. "That is acceptable. You may return to your designated territories." Turned and walked out of the chamber with her delegation following behind her. None of them spoke until they were safely aboard their shuttle and heading back to their ship. "That went about as well as we expected," said Commander James, military advisor. He was a tall man with gray hair and a face that had seen too many battles. "They were never going to accept us." "No," agreed. "They weren't, but that doesn't matter now. What matters is what we do next." She looked out the window at the stars. Somewhere out there, Earth was waiting for her report. Somewhere out there, 8 billion humans were about to learn that the galaxy had judged them and found them unworthy. "We play the long game," she said. "We do what we've always done. We survive. We adapt. We grow stronger. And when the time comes, we show them what beasts can really do." The shuttle docked with their ship and sent her report back to Earth. The response came quickly, as she had known it would. The leaders of Earth's united government had already prepared for this outcome. They had hoped for acceptance, but they had planned for rejection. The plan was simple. Humanity would follow the Conclave's rules. They would trade at the designated stations. They would stay at the edge of civilized space. They would not cause trouble or draw attention to themselves. But in secret, they would build. The shipyards went up in hidden asteroids and empty systems where no one ever went. The training facilities were constructed deep underground on colony worlds that the Conclave had never bothered to survey. The weapons research labs were buried in the hearts of moons and gas giants, places where no civilized species would ever think to look. Humanity had been called beasts, and perhaps they were, but beasts knew how to hide. Beasts knew how to wait. And beasts knew that sometimes the best way to survive was to let your enemies think you were weak. 30 years passed. Retired from diplomatic service and spent her final years teaching the next generation of human leaders. She taught them patience. She taught them humility. She taught them to smile and nod and accept the insults of the civilized species without showing any anger. But she also taught them to remember. "They called us beasts," she told her students. "And they were right. We are beasts, but they do not understand what that means. They think it makes us weak. They think it makes us primitive. They do not understand that being a beast means we know how to fight. We know how to survive. We know how to do whatever it takes to protect our own." She died at the age of 93, surrounded by her family and her students. Her last words were simple. "When the time comes, do not hesitate." The time came sooner than anyone expected. The first reports arrived at Earth Command on a quiet morning in early spring. A border station had gone silent, then another, then a whole system. At first, the Conclave thought it was a technical malfunction. Then they thought it was a natural disaster. Then they sent a fleet to investigate, and the fleet never came back. The hero had arrived. They came from the void between galaxies, from the empty darkness where no stars shone and no life had ever existed. They were machines, but not like any machines the galaxy had ever seen. They did not want resources or territory or slaves. They did not want anything that the civilized species could offer or negotiate. They wanted silence. Life to the Harrow was noise. It was chaos. It was disorder in a universe that should have been perfect and still and quiet, and they had come to make the galaxy quiet again. The fell first. Their beautiful crystal cities were reduced to dust in a matter of days. Their fleets, designed for ceremony and patrol and the occasional police action, shattered against the Harrow like glass against steel. Millions died in the first wave. Billions more died in the weeks that followed. The conclave met in emergency session, but there was nothing to discuss. The civilized species had not fought a real war in thousands of years. They had transcended violence. They had evolved past the need for conflict. And now that conflict had come to them, they had no idea what to do. Ambassador, her crystalline form cracked and dim, sent out a desperate call for help. She did not call the other conclave species. They were already fleeing, their enlightened philosophies providing no framework for facing extinction. She called the beasts. The message arrived at Earth Command at exactly 1400 hours, standard time. It was short and desperate, and filled with a terror that humanity had never heard from the proud before. "Help us," said, "please help us, they are killing everything." Admiral Sarah, granddaughter of the man who had stood beside 30 years ago, read the message and smiled. It was not a nice smile. It was the smile of a predator that had been waiting in the shadows for a very long time. "Well," she said to her officers, "it seems the civilized species finally need their beasts." She pressed the button that would activate the hidden fleets, the button that would open the secret shipyards, the button that would unleash everything humanity had been building for 3 decades. "Sound general quarters," she said. "All ships to battle stations, we're going to war." Across human space, the call went out. On colony worlds and space stations, in asteroid bases and hidden facilities, humanity responded. They had been waiting for this moment. They had been preparing for this moment. They had never stopped being what they were. The beasts were awake. And they were hungry. The first human fleet emerged from hidden space 3 days after the call for help arrived. There were 200 warships in that fleet, and every single one of them had been designed for a single purpose: to kill. They were not beautiful like the vessels. They were not elegant like the ships. They were ugly and brutal and covered in weapons that the civilized species had never seen before. They were ships built by beasts for beasts, and they carried beasts into battle. Admiral stood on the bridge of her flagship, the Earth vessel Relentless, and looked at the tactical display. The Harrow were everywhere. They had already consumed half of space, and they were moving fast. Their ships were massive, black things that seemed to swallow light, and their weapons could tear through the strongest shields the Conclave had ever built. "Contact the Harrow fleet," ordered. "All frequencies, let them know we're here." Her communications officer looked surprised. "Ma'am, you want to announce our presence." "I want them to know what's coming," said. "I want them to see us. I want them to have time to be afraid." The message went out. It was simple and direct, the way humans liked their messages. "This is Admiral Sarah of the Earth Defense Fleet. You have entered space that is under human protection. You have one chance to withdraw. If you do not, we will destroy you." The Harrow did not respond with words. They responded by turning their fleet toward the human ships and accelerating to attack speed. "Smiled that predators smile again." "Good," she said. "I was hoping they'd say that." The Battle of Skate began. It was not like the battles the civilized species had fought. Those had been elegant affairs, with ships dancing around each other at long range, trading precise shots according to ancient rules of engagement. The civilized species believed in minimizing casualties. They believed in proportional response. They believed in all the things that made war clean and controlled and civilized. Humans did not believe in any of those things. The first wave of human ships did not try to engage the Harrow at long range. They accelerated directly into the enemy formation at maximum speed, their weapons blazing. The Harrow ships, which had been designed to fight enemies that kept their distance, found themselves suddenly surrounded by small, fast vessels that were trying to get as close as possible. The human ships were taking damage. They were taking terrible damage, but they did not stop. They did not retreat. They drove deeper and deeper into the enemy formation, and when their ships were too damaged to fight, they did something that the Harrow's tactical computers could not predict. They rammed. Captain James, no relation to the famous ambassador, was the first to do it. His ship, the destroyer Unbroken, had lost its main weapons and most of its crew. It was venting atmosphere and its engines were failing. Any sane commander would have ordered an evacuation. Was not a sane commander, he was a beast. All hands abandon ship, he ordered. Except for volunteers, we're going to give these bastards something to remember us by. 20 crew members stayed with him. 20 humans who chose to die so that their deaths might mean something. Aimed his crippled ship at the largest Harrow vessel in the formation. He pushed his failing engines to maximum power. He felt the ship shaking apart around him, and he did not care. "This is for Earth," he said. "This is for humanity. This is for every species that ever called us beasts." The Unbroken struck the Harrow command ship at 3/4 of the speed of light. The explosion was visible from 1,000 kilometers away. When the light faded, the Harrow command ship was gone. The battle continued for 19 days. The human fleets took terrible losses. Ships were destroyed by the dozen. Thousands of soldiers died in the fighting. But for every human ship that fell, 3 Harrow vessels went with it. The humans fought with a ferocity that the Harrow had never encountered before. They did not retreat when they were outnumbered. They did not surrender when their situation was hopeless. They fought and they died and they kept fighting even as they were dying. The Harrow were machines. They were logical. They were efficient. And they could not understand why these small, fragile creatures would not stop. Their tactical computers tried to predict human behavior, but the predictions kept failing. Humans did things that made no sense. They sacrificed themselves for objectives that had no strategic value. They held positions long after those positions should have been abandoned. They flew suicide missions not because they had to, but because they chose to. The Harrow had calculated the responses of civilized species. They had models for how enlightened beings would react to their attacks. They had not calculated for beasts. On the 19th day, the human fleet broke through the Harrow lines and reached They found it burning. The great crystal cities were in ruins. Millions lay dead in the streets, but there were survivors. There were always survivors. Admiral personally led the ground assault to rescue them. She walked through the ruins of Prime with a rifle in her hands and her soldiers at her side. She saw things that would haunt her for the rest of her life, but she did not stop. She did not hesitate. That was what beasts did. They protected their own. The war lasted 7 years. It was the longest and bloodiest conflict in the history of the known galaxy. Entire worlds were destroyed. Entire species were nearly wiped out. The Harrow pushed deep into conclave space, and for a time it seemed like nothing could stop them. But the humans did not stop fighting. They built new ships as fast as the old ones were destroyed. They trained new soldiers as fast as the old ones died. They developed new weapons and new tactics and new strategies, each one more brutal and effective than the last. The other conclave species watched in amazement and horror. They had never seen anything like this. They had never imagined that any species could fight with such relentless, unstoppable fury. The humans were taking losses that would have broken any civilized species. They were suffering casualties that would have ended any civilized war. And they kept coming. The turning point came in the 4th year of the war. The Harrow had developed a new weapon, a device that could destabilize the cores of stars and cause them to go supernova. They planned to use it to destroy Earth itself, to cut off the heart of the human resistance. The humans found out about the plan through intelligence that cost them 3 entire spy networks and over 1,000 lives. They knew when the attack was coming. They knew which Harrow fleet would carry the weapon, and they knew that they had only one chance to stop it. Admiral led the assault personally. She took every ship that could still fly and threw them at the Harrow fleet. It was a desperate gamble. If they failed, Earth would die. If they succeeded, they might still lose most of their remaining forces. They did not fail. The Battle of Saul was the bloodiest single engagement in the history of human warfare. Over 300 human ships were destroyed. Over 50,000 soldiers died. But when the battle was over, the Harrow fleet was gone, and Earth still stood. After that, the tide began to turn. The humans had learned how to fight the Harrow. They had figured out their weaknesses, their patterns, their limitations, and they had developed something that no other species had ever developed before: weapons that could permanently destroy Harrow ships, preventing them from rebuilding and returning. The other conclave species began to rally behind the human fleet. They provided resources and supplies and, eventually, soldiers of their own. The war became a true galactic effort, with humans leading the charge and the civilized species supporting them. In the 7th year, the human fleet pursued the last Harrow remnants into the void between galaxies. It was a long and dangerous journey, into spaces where no known species had ever gone. Many ships were lost along the way. Many soldiers died in the darkness. But they did not stop. They could not stop, because humans understood something that the civilized species had forgotten. You do not leave an enemy capable of returning. The final battle took place in the absolute darkness of intergalactic space, where no stars shone and no help could reach them. The humans fought the last of the Harrow, and they destroyed them utterly. Not defeated, not driven back, destroyed. When it was over, only a handful of human ships remained. They had won, but the cost had been terrible. Admiral looked out at the empty darkness where the Harrow had once been. She thought about all the people who had died to reach this moment, all the sacrifices that had been made, all the beasts who had fought and bled and died so that the galaxy might live. "It's done," she said quietly. "It's finally done." The remnants of the human fleet turned and began the long journey home. Behind them, the void was silent. The conclave chamber looked different now. The walls were still made of living crystal, but there were cracks in them that had never been repaired. The floors were still polished stone, but they bore the marks of battles that had been fought here when the Harrow had nearly reached the heart of civilized space. The 12 seats of power were still standing, but some of them were empty now, their species too diminished to send proper delegations. Ambassador stood at the center of the chamber. Her crystalline form had been rebuilt after the Battle of Sgate, but the cracks remained. She had chosen to keep them, as a reminder of what she had survived and what her people had lost. She was here to welcome the human delegation. Admiral was old now. The war had taken decades from her life, and the years since had taken more. But she still stood straight and proud as she walked into the chamber, her uniform bearing the marks of 100 battles and her eyes carrying the weight of 1,000,000 dead. Behind her came the other members of her delegation, soldiers and scientists, diplomats and engineers, the survivors of a war that had nearly destroyed everything. Stepped forward to meet them. For a long moment the two women simply looked at each other. They had fought side by side at Sgate. They had bled together. They had watched friends die together. They were connected now in ways that transcended species and biology. "Thank you," said. Her voice was soft, filled with an emotion that she had never shown before. "Thank you for everything you have done. Thank you for saving us." Nodded. "We did what we had to do," she said. "That's all." "No," said. "You did more than that. You did what no one else could do. You did what we were too civilized to do ourselves." She turned to address the assembled conclave. Her voice rang out through the chamber, strong and clear despite the damage to her form. 30 years ago, we stood in this chamber and judged humanity. We called them beasts. We said they were primitive, violent, unfit for civilized society. We were arrogant in our wisdom and blind in our enlightenment. We could not see what was right in front of us. She paused, looking around at the other delegates. Many of them lowered their eyes, unable to meet her gaze. "We were wrong," continued, "not about what humanity was, but about what it meant. We thought that being a beast was a flaw, a failure, a sign that a species had not evolved past its primitive nature. We did not understand that it was a strength, a gift, a weapon that could save us all." Listened in silence. She had heard speeches before, many speeches, but there was something different about this one, something honest. "We called you beasts," said, turning back to. "And you are, but you were not the monsters we imagined. You were not the threats we feared. You were protectors, guardians, warriors who would fight and die for those who could not fight for themselves." She took a step closer to. "We were wrong to exclude you from our conclave. We were wrong to treat you as lesser beings. We were wrong about so many things, and I am sorry." Looked at the ambassador for a long moment. Then she shook her head. "No," she said, "you were not wrong." The chamber fell silent, even seemed surprised. "You called us beasts," continued, "and we are beasts. You said we were violent. We are violent. You said we had not transcended our animal nature. We have not. Everything you said about us was accurate." She stepped forward, her voice growing stronger. "What you failed to understand is that being a beast is not something to transcend. It is something to master. It is something to embrace, because the universe is not a gentle place. It does not reward enlightenment. It does not care about philosophy or wisdom or 10,000 years of peaceful development. The universe rewards survival, and survival requires teeth." She looked around the chamber at the 12 species that had once judged humanity so harshly. "You evolved past your predator nature. You became civilized, enlightened, peaceful, and when the darkness came, you could not fight it. You did not know how. All your wisdom and all your philosophy could not protect you from something that simply wanted you dead." Paused, letting her words sink in. "We did not save you despite being beasts. We saved you because we are beasts, because we understand what you forgot. That sometimes survival requires violence. That sometimes peace can only be bought with blood. That sometimes the only way to protect what you love is to become something that your enemies will fear." She walked to the center of the chamber where had stood 30 years ago. She thought about her grandmother's words. She thought about all the humans who had died believing in those words. She thought about the future. "You may keep your classification," she said. "Call us beasts, call us primitives, call us whatever makes you comfortable. But understand this. The next time the darkness comes, and it will come, you will not call on your philosophers. You will not call on your enlightened minds. You will call on us." She smiled, and it was the same smile that had terrified the hero, the smile of a beast. "And we will answer, because that is what we are. That is what we have always been. We are the beasts that guard the gate. We are the violence that keeps the peace. We are the darkness that fights the darkness." She turned and walked toward the door, her delegation falling in behind her. "We will take our seat in your conclave," she said over her shoulder. "Not because you have finally accepted us as civilized, but because you have finally understood that civilization needs its beasts." She paused at the threshold. "And you're welcome." Then she was gone. The chamber remained silent for a long time after the humans left. The delegates looked at each other, uncertain how to process what had just happened. Finally spoke. "The human ambassador is correct," she said. "We did not understand them. We thought their nature was a weakness. We did not see that it was their greatest strength." She moved to the conclave's central console and entered a series of commands. A new seat rose from the floor, positioned among the 12 original seats. It was made of simple steel and leather, nothing like the elaborate thrones of the other species. It was rough and practical and unadorned. It was perfect. Humanity takes its place in the conclave, announced, not as beasts tamed and civilized, but as beasts pure and true. May we never forget what they taught us. May we never forget what they sacrificed for us. She looked at the new seat, and for the first time since the war began, she felt something like hope. May we never forget that sometimes salvation comes with teeth. The chamber doors closed, and the conclave began a new chapter in its history, a chapter that included the beasts. Far away on a small blue planet at the edge of the galaxy, Admiral sat in a garden and watched the sunset. She was tired. She was old. She had seen too much and lost too many, but she was also proud. Her communicator buzzed. She looked at it and saw a message from Earth Command. The Conclave has officially recognized humanity as a full member species. Our seat is waiting for us. Smiled and put the communicator away. She had done her part. Others would carry the torch now. She closed her eyes and listened to the wind in the trees. It was peaceful here, quiet. But she knew that the peace would not last forever. It never did. Somewhere out there in the vast darkness between the stars, other threats were waiting. Other challenges would arise. Other battles would need to be fought. And when they came, humanity would be ready. Because they were beasts. And beasts never stopped fighting.